What I'm going to talk to you about are the problems that we've got in archives and libraries in terms of how we deal with sound recordings. And having read Alice's blog, I suddenly changed some of what I was going to say. And what I want to talk about today is in part the practicalities, the issues that we've got at the moment and how I would like to see things developed in the future, but also some of the ethical implications, I think, of this that we have to consider as archivists, as the people who look after and who deal with this material, not just for the projects that collect it, but as time goes on, so in 5 years, in 50 years, in potentially 500 years' time as well. And I thought what I would do would be to start by telling you what we do at the moment. And what you would do if you were going to come to the Keep tomorrow to get out some of the recordings that you are actually going to work on tomorrow, because I think you're going to work on some of the 50 voices, is that correct? So I thought what I would do is demonstrate what those 50 voices actually look like in reality. They look like they live in boxes. So our digital recordings all live in boxes at the moment. I envisage that in some time, hopefully not too distant future, maybe in the next couple of years, we will start to actually keep all of our digital sound recordings on servers, and we'll be able to do different things with them. But at the moment, they're all kept in boxes. And you'll have to excuse my photography. I went into the stores yesterday and I was doing lots of photography and realised I wasn't very good at it. So if you order a sound recording at the moment at the Keep, and I should say that other institutions are probably a lot further advanced than we are, but this is what happens with us. You get given a box, and in that box are some folders. And those of you that have used paper archives are probably thinking this all looks really familiar at the moment, and it does, because we treat them in the same way as paper archives at the moment. In those boxes are files. This is a file which relates to the oral history of the Vice-Chancellor of Sussex, Asa Briggs, Lord Asa Briggs. When you open that file, you would receive some bits of paper and a CD-ROM. And apologies for those of you at the back who wouldn't be able to see this, but within those bits of paper are summary records. So this particular one tells you who Asa Briggs was, when the interview was, how long it is, who interviewed him, the interview log and so forth. And then we have the transcription itself. So you're able to look through the transcription whilst listening. But actually the reality is the transcription for this particular set of interviews is only partial. And the reason I'm showing you all of this is because this is the data that we've got to work with when we are trying to create records that will help you as researchers find stuff on those sound recordings. And the reality is, and again, I'm really sorry that you can't see this in more detail, that we create a record on this particular database. It's on, this particular database that we use is called Calm, which is ironic title really, considering how stressed it can make us. And it's based on something called ISAG, which is International Standard of Archival Description General, which is generally what most archives tend to use. And the problem with ISAG is it doesn't actually help us describe sound recordings. It's very good at helping us describe bits of paper. And indeed, even now, those bits of paper, researchers are beginning to want to know what's within them, not simply what they are called or when they were written. And ISAG fails us in this. It doesn't allow us to make those notes or to create that sort of searchability for the researcher. And of course, if you think about that with a piece of paper, it's much easier for a researcher to get the piece of paper out and start looking through it and finding out what keywords there may be that they could use. It's much more difficult when we're handing them a CD-ROM, which has got nothing characteristic on it. In fact, all we can do is hand you the CD-ROM and give you this and wish you luck. And you sit there and you listen and you listen and you listen. So this would be 2.5 hours that you would listen through Asa Briggs's oral history, which is fascinating, but it's quite long. And it may not have what you're interested in. So what we are interested in is what the technologies that you potentially can bring to us that would help us catalogue, that would help us describe, that would help us analyse. And some of the work that I think Sharon will be talking to you about, Sharon's already started working on some of the oral history recordings that we're going to be adding to our resistance archives, will hopefully help the researcher pinpoint exactly what they want without having to have an individual sit there for 2 hours and type every word and every second that word is being said and match it through. But rushing on, this is all great and would make my life, not my life, the people who work for me and their lives an awful lot easier. But what I have to consider as they are enjoying the fact that they can sort of easily archive and catalogue, describe using this technology is what the ethical implications of that actually are. So we're not just talking about description. As soon as we start describing in more detail, we're allowing a greater level of access in some ways. We're also allowing the potential, as it becomes digital, for people to manipulate those. Manipulate's probably the wrong word, but I'm always overcautious. To use those archives, those digital recordings in a different way to the way that's traditionally used. And that actually probably makes a huge difference to the people who are being recorded, because in their minds they're thinking of the traditional uses for their interview. Suddenly we're changing how that happens. So we need to reconsider the permissions we get from them. We need to reconsider the contracts that we make with them. And in many cases we have to revisit contracts, which can be difficult if somebody has died or if they have, they're not actually that comfortable with the new project that you might want to impose on their recording. The other thing that struck me from Alice's blog post, actually, which was about the Amazon murder trial example, where a lot of data had been collected and was potentially being repurposed. Its use could be repurposed. And it wasn't so much the ethical side of that made me think, but I thought, blimey, that's an awful lot of data to store, isn't it? And it's how we appraise that data. So at the moment, if somebody gives us a paper archive, we're able to say, well, we don't want your old bills. We only want the letters that you wrote. But how do we do that with sound recordings that are potentially absolutely huge? So those are all, sort of more things in terms of how we as archivists and librarians need to work with those digital products, with those sounds. And I think I will leave it there because my time is probably up.
Thank you very much.